Alright, this is a baseline temperature test of my machine here. Picked up one of these cheapy ones from Amazon. 77, block itself 73, and the back side of this bearing is 73. Front bearing housing 73, and then the clutch itself is 73. So what I discovered here, boys and girls, is that this rear bearing is going. This thing gets pretty warm once it's running, and the tech I spoke to thought it was this clutch fork here, because this is your spindle brake, and so when it kicks it into neutral on certain operations, it'll shove the spindle fork into this clutch pack back here, and that stops your spindle. However, the previous owner of the machine put in a piece of wood back in here which spaced this out, so unfortunately it was not this clutch pack. It is the two bearings that are dying in this thing. So I'm currently almost done with my order here, and once I'm done with this order, we are going to be pulling this spindle and replacing the bearings and whatever else kind of surprises that we find here. So I'm going to run some parts, and then I'll come back with a temperature check here and show you guys how much it's heating up here. Usually the front stays about 80-ish degrees. This right here gets to be about 100, which isn't great, and this rear one gets to be like 108 or so after maybe a stick of running, which is about 30 minutes. And the only other thing it could be is the lube line for the bearings is not supplying. But fun fact, you still have to pull the whole spindle in order to access it. So while it's pulled off, you might as well just change everything you got. So we're going to be learning a heck of a lot more about this thing coming up here. So let me run a few sticks and I'll show you guys how warm she gets. Well, that pretty much puts the nail in the coffin for it. I was able to run it, and it stayed at 85 degrees for about an hour, and that's where it stayed. And then today I came out, turned it on, and within just a few minutes this thing is already ripping hot. So that means this rear bearing is shot, and or the lubrication line to the bearing is plugged, and in order to fix that you have to pull the whole spindle. So while we're pulling the whole spindle, we might as well get new bearings, maybe a new clutch, and just do an overall general inspection of the machine, and just get a state of the health anyway here. So FYI, I have never done this, so I'm doing it for those who might enjoy watching it, or mechanically inclined, or other screw machine nuts. I do have a source to ask questions, so that's always nice. And he recommended I untension these chains before I pull the master links out of them. And I'm thinking either it like pulls out, or I don't think it pulls up. It's got to pull out. I don't think this line is separate here. I mean, we're going to find out. So I guess first things first, I can start pulling all this crap out of the way and just see what we're working with. And then I mean, that's all that I'm pulling technically, is just this here. And I don't think I can get around disconnecting stuff. So I think we're in it for the long haul here. So there's 2 sets of bearings here and 2 sets of bearings up here. And so while we're in there, we're gonna either clean the lube line really well, or we're just gonna buy a new one and work with it from there. And I guess we'll see what surprises are in store for us here. So let me get busy here. Alright, well, before I started, the gentleman I was talking with suggested that this spindle brake clutch was sticking, and so I figured might as well take a look at it. And boy howdy if he wasn't right. I had to break the spindle brake clutch apart in order to remove it, because it was just so jammed and stuck to itself. So spindle brake clutch back here, there's a fork, and when it goes into the neutral position, that fork pushes that clutch, which stops the spindle from turning, and you can do milling operations or drilling or whatever. So I don't need that to run, so I just gutted it. It is an accessory that you buy for the machine, so of course I'm going to hang on to it. And who knows, later down the line, maybe I need to buy a new set of clutches for it. This one came out in one piece, but you can see there's some pretty good damage to it. So after I did this, I ran the machine for a good 15 minutes, and that thing did not get hot whatsoever. So I'm going to call this a win for now. I'm definitely going to clean the bearing housing that sits right here. This is the feed mechanism that shoves the tube forward here, so we're just gonna, might as well, since we're here, we're gonna clean everything we can and lubricate the bearing that sits right here. Ultrasonic clean that, make sure it's nice and clean. So dodged a very big bullet here on the old screw machine. Hopefully this will be the last scare she has for a while, because I'm tired of running an order and then having something go wrong halfway in the middle of the order. I would like her to be more reliable, but so far she's like, I'll give her a solid B+ for reliability. But anyway, I'm going to clean up some of that, and I'll bring you back when it's all squeaky clean here. Well, here are some of the parts cleaned up. There's this bearing cage. Kind of looks like it's a type of Garlite high impact material, and this thing got pretty hot at some point. Let's see if I can hold it steady. You see that in that groove. And then on the right where my fingertip is there's some galling of the metal there. So this is after I cleaned it up, sanded it the best I could, and then did a deep clean on it. And then this is where the bearing rides, right here. The ball bearings spin around in there. And at some point this got really hot too right here, and then at some point it like galled, so there was some metal material pushed in to where the tip of my finger is, so I cleaned that up. So these are, you know, as clean as they're gonna get. And then the ball bearings themselves, let's see if I can find one. Well, there's one, but yeah, you can kind of see the damage on it there. There's a few pretty bad ones in here. And I didn't want to put crappy ball bearings back into my nice cleaned cage here. So went to the Amazon and got brand new ball bearings. These are 5/16 440 stainless steel ball bearings. So we're going to just replace all these bearings because ooh, there's a good one. Come back. There it is. Can't see anything, it's too shiny. Yeah, right there. So we don't want those spinning around, making our bearing housing any worse than it already is. And surprisingly enough, there was no grease in this, and so this gets covered like this. Then this rides in the middle, and they tell you to lube the shaft that this goes in and out of, but I don't see a way of the lube actually getting into the bearings itself. It lubes the interior of this, but there's nothing lubing this outside. So I'm not sure what their thinking is here, but I do have some high temperature red grease. I might put a bit of grease down in here, because there's no way I can get lube inside of that once I assemble it. And I'd feel a lot better having the grease in there, helping the bearings out while this is spinning. If it's too sticky, which it might be, so I haven't fully committed to the grease. I might put a little, very small amount in there and then fill it up with the bearing oil that I use to lubricate this machine. But there is no lube line or anything going into this bearing, which is somewhat concerning, but I know Brown and Sharp had some kind of plan behind that. So anyway, plan is to change out our bearings, put everything back together again, and hope for the best here. And I'm waiting on oh, those got black, didn't they? I'm waiting on some very, very tiny cotter pins from McMaster to come in, because these retainers here fit into the groove there, and there's a pin with this itty bitty cotter pin hole that keeps these together. So we are going to replace the cotter pins, and I hope they fit, because they are the smallest ones I can get. If not, we will MacGyver something to work. So that is where we are sitting currently on the old machine here. I don't think oh, I did lube. These feet were pretty nasty, so I took them out and cleaned them. It looks like That's where they live. So it tells you to lube here, which goes on the inside of that, but there's nothing on the outside really keeping that lubed. And it's kind of the same style as this, which this spins like that. And I'm actually, that's different. I don't think this one actually spun. I think it just sat there. So that might be something to look into. Huh. Anyway, adventures in the old machine here. I'll be sure to clean this up. If you do remove this, I had to take the top half of that cap off, and then you needed to take a magnet and then remove those ball bearings because they are free sitting in there, and then slowly rotate the bearing up and take out the ball bearings. Don't do what I did and just pop it off and turn it sideways and then dump a bunch of ball bearings into your machine, and then you have to scramble around and get them all, which I did. But if you miss one of those and it like sits into that groove there, and then you turn it on and it spins, that would be a big disaster. So don't do that. I won't be putting that fork back on because I don't need it. So it'll just live in my toolbox with all the other disassembled parts of the machine that I don't use. Anyway, I will install the ball bearings here and get you guys the cotter pins here shortly. Alright, well, we got it all back together here, and the cotter pins did work. However, only one of the legs got into the hole. So these are 3/64 cotter pins. So they're pretty small. They will work just fine. Nothing's going to fly out. You have to install these from the back side, which this retains them in there anyway, so they're just there to hold it in, so it'll be just fine. I did end up putting a very small amount of grease on this upper portion of it, so when it spins it'll swirl it around there just fine. So overall installation was it was a bit of a figuring it out as you go kind of thing. But what I ended up doing is putting on the bottom half with the bearing cage with no bearings, put it in there, and that was after I installed both of these retainers on either side, ran the cotter pin through them to kind of hold them back, put that lower cage on there, rotated it, put in a couple bearings, rotated it back, put in a couple bearings, and then as it just sat there, I filled the rest of it up and then put this top clamp on, or the top cage on here. Nut went back on, feeder tube went back on. Now it's gonna be kind of a turn it on and see what happens kind of thing. I made sure to look at the book here. So these are the 2 feet, and then this is the sleeve that goes over them, and then here's that bearing assembly, and then there's that nut that rides on that. So looks like this whole thing is the spindle shaft. So make sure you don't bugger up those threads right there. And Brown & Sharpe did a really nice brass inlay piece behind this set screw, so the set screw isn't directly impacting on the threads. There's like a little brass plug that's threaded the same as this nut that actually pushes on the thread, so that's pretty spiffy there. Looks like I gotta put covers back on, but before I do that I wanted to turn it on and see what happens. So let me do that and we'll find out together, I suppose. All right, we got to do that. Well, looks like it did okay, and that's why the covers are supposed to be on there. I did notice it was a little rattly. That might be because of the grease. If not, I know it's always been kind of loud, but if it turns into more of a problem, I can always just take it apart, clean it, and put bearing oil back into it. But as you can see, you can't really get anything inside of it, and you're supposed to lube the outside here every 4 hours of machine time, which I guess that'll kind of go into those bearings, but not really. So yeah, let me put the covers back on this old thing, and then we'll see. Actually, okay, so hear me out while you drink your coffee. I was having a theory that I could only turn it on with my VFD if I turn the on switch on and then the VFD. But I was thinking if this clutch was breaking or sticking up against my shaft here, that it would cause resistance in that motor, which would trip my VFD. So I'm curious to see how long I can turn it on and off without my VFD throwing a code because of that. So that's what I'm curious about. Give it a few seconds. Nope. There it goes. Well, it was worth a shot anyway. Alright, let me clean up this nastiness and put the covers back on, and we'll bring you guys back. Alright, covers are back on. You got to make sure that the little spring is down in its hole down in there, because it flings up oil up here and it goes into this, and that drips down into this bearing there, so make sure that's intact. I ended up taking the top half of this apart, cleaned the grease out of it, and then I put some bearing oil in there, and it sounds way better. It's actually a lot quieter now as a machine since I changed those bearings out, so that's probably needed that for quite a while. Other than that, it's been running okay. I did get a bucket of machine oil here. So it's just multi-purpose machine oil, ISO 68. Picked up this little pumper from Amazon, and it works okay. But that way I can just take the nozzle and stick it right into the reservoir there. This is what lubricates all my bearings and everything on the machine, so always important to have oil in there. Other than that, I haven't had any other complaints with it. It hasn't lost its prime yet, which it might today because it's been sitting for about a week from the previous clip. It might be like a week and a half. I only got 4 more sticks of material to run, so as a labor day, we're just gonna work for myself and get these done, and then wait till they have another order for me, and then I'm basically halfway done with the order. So that's it from here. We'll keep you guys updated as it keeps working here. The only other thing I might do on the next batch is change out my form tool, so then it gets rid of that nub there on the end of the part. And this is the form tool I've been using. I've ran like 5 or 6 orders with it, so I mean it's well earned its money because each one's about $100. So that's the only other thing I might change out. If you guys have any questions on these, you can comment down below, or if I don't know it, then I'm sure somebody with more experience is watching and they can comment on it. So thanks for watching, guys, and we'll see you in the next one.